This meeting to order for April 7, 2014. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Short?
Here.
Mrs. Soltis? Here. Mr. Becker?
Here.
Mrs. Lovejoy? Here. Mr. Monroe?
Here. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Start with Superintendent Communications.
Before I introduce Mr. Summers, I was going to do a presentation on professional learning communities. I want to do a little update on our strategic planning process. Currently, we have initiated an online survey, which is on our website. We've had about 208 responses to the online survey. We did a phone survey last week. 192 people responded to the phone survey. We are also in the process of, we did 2 focus groups, one at McDonald's, one in Hiram, and one in Shalersville. There's going to be focus groups in all the buildings and still in Manaway and at the high school. So we're going to continue that process too. Sometime at the end of the week, there should be a random mailing out to people with the survey to get more responses. And sometime at the end of April, the board, myself, and Cheryl Emmerich, the executive director from the ESC, will have a work session. We'll try to collect the data and start looking at what the data means and start setting some goals and priorities for the district. So it's been an exciting process. It's been enlightening, a lot of good information, and I look forward to the process. So I don't know if the board members have any questions in that regard.
Are we on target for how many respondents we were looking for?
Yeah, I think we're doing pretty well. You know, I think we're getting some good information. We'll see, you know, within the focus groups and then meeting with the staff. I know Cheryl's at the bus garage tomorrow, and then all the schools next couple of weeks. So I think once we get all that information tabulated in the focus groups and the random surveys will be interesting too to see what we get back. I mean, you usually looking anywhere between, you know, if you get 20%, 25%, that's really good response rate, you know, statistically. So if we get something around that, you know, it'll look pretty good. I think we'll get some good data out of it.
What was the turnout of those couple public meetings?
Hiram was very lightly attended, and Shalersville too. McDonald's was good because I think people get breakfast, so they got some good response in there. She's going to do Jake's for lunch, so I think we'll have some good response there. So you know, we'll see.
Okay.
We emailed it out, made a phone call out to people to attend. It's been advertised. So you know, I don't know. I was just talking to Mr. Sork. I don't know if people do the surveys online and the phone survey, maybe they think that's input, they don't come to the focus room, I'm not quite sure, so we'll see, but we got a couple more coming up, so. Okay.
I had a call from somebody in Hiram who said that their focus group was during spring break, and it was almost as if they felt that they could only go to the Hiram one if they lived in Hiram. I said, no, you can attend any. So.
Okay. And maybe I'll do a call out just to remind people that you can go to one, so that might be a good idea, so. Then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Summers, who's going to speak to us about professional learning communities at the high school. Thank you, Mr. Summers.
Professional learning communities are something that they're not new, but I would say within the past 10 years we have formalized professional learning communities. Educator by the name of Richard Dufour is the one who has written books on professional learning communities, and I guess the way I would like to very quickly start is by saying education comes under criticism for not getting into the 21st century and how we teach students. And one of the problems we have, especially in a high school, is having time to talk and collaborate as professionals. And if you think about high schools, we're isolated in individual classrooms, and teachers go to their classrooms at 7:30 and they come out at 3 o'clock, and many of them go home. And during that period of time, there's little time for collaboration other than just hall talk or faculty lounge talk. And so formalizing professional learning communities is very important if we're going to start collaborating as to how we move our schools ahead. And we are under fire all the time for that. PLCs, as they're known, we're good at acronyms in this business. We have hundreds of them. So professional learning communities have been known as PLCs. And the characteristics of PLCs are shared mission, vision, and values. And if any of you know how difficult it is to sit around a table and share a common value or a common vision about anything, no matter what the subject, is very difficult. And so PLCs and getting together and collaborating is going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight because we're just not practiced in doing that and in efficient ways. Results orientation. We're good at predicting, and many times we'll make the results come out the way we predicted it, no matter what. And so a results orientation based upon data is very important. And by data I mean anything from student surveys to test scores to SLOs, which is another acronym I won't go into tonight, but it all has to do with student outcomes. Collective inquiry, which means what we want to do is get in our group, is we want to inquire, and we want to not just look at the status quo, but we want to go beyond that. We can't move ahead if we don't get rid of the status quo. Collaborative teams, again, it takes time for teams to get together and really do serious collaboration. And serious collaboration means that your ideas that you bring up are not shot down immediately, that you take time to develop ideas and not evaluate them immediately, and that you form a respect for each other even though you have a difference of opinion, which is really common in education, as I suppose it is in any organization. Action orientation and experimentation. It's easy for committees to talk. It's easy for committees to say, yeah, you know, if we did this, putting that into action and actually putting the rubber down to the road and saying, let's go, and taking a risk, and sometimes it is experimentation. But again, we really need to jump ahead of the classroom and rows of students if we're going to start doing significant differences. And this would be one of the guiding principles. And continuous improvement, which means we always look not to the status quo again, but are we really improving? And that goes back to our results orientation. Okay, which brings me to the high school schedule. And board members, I put a master schedule there in front of you. If you look at a high school schedule, you can see that we are unlike the other schools in the respect we really have no time during the day to bring teams of people together. So this year I've been doing a PLC, but it's been at lunchtime, and lunchtime is not ideal to bring teachers together, but the teachers here have been absolutely great about collaborating at lunchtime, and we've made really some good headway on ideas. If we are to really get to the meat of high schools and processing data, however, we have to look at this collaboration time differently. We need a time when we can actually do that. I've asked Cindy to talk a little bit about her PLC at the primary building.
And at the primary building, you know, due to schedule, everyone has schedule constraints to deal with in their building, but one of the ways we've tried to weave it in, they've done prior and we've continued this year, is looking at our recess time. So we, you know, it's that 25 to 30 minutes, one day a week, so kindergarten and first grade meet on Tuesdays, second grade meets on Thursdays. And we get in, set agendas, work as quickly and diligently as we can through our data, take a look at, okay, well, how are our students performing? What are we doing with this data? Are they learning it? If they're not, what can we do? Where do we go on the next step? So for us, that's just the most efficient way we have right now in our day to make it work.
Okay, and you have that opportunity to do that. Okay.
Right,
Thank
the
you.
common planning we have, yeah.
Thanks, Cindy. And the other buildings could respond pretty much the same. There's time actually built in to doing that. So, what I am looking at next year are late arrival days on alternating Wednesdays from 7:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. That would mean 3 minutes taken from each class twice a month. Okay. I wanted to put that 3 minutes in so that you really know that this is not going to be that intrusive, but an hour to collaborate on the business that we have at hand is going to be very valuable. Student arrival times. This is, and a lot of this is based upon my thinking and conversations with Mr. Toth. Regular time at 7:40, the freshmen would arrive at regular time. And I'll get into the freshman work here on the next slide. Students in grades 10 and 12 that are missing work, and this is that model that Southeast has, and I don't know who adopted that yet, Julie, but what we will do is require students who are missing homework assignments or have had unexcused absences, we'll just let them know that they have to come in on that morning to make up the time. And since the time is ours and not theirs, we can actually count them as truant if we're asking them to come in and they don't. Students in grades 10 and 12 with transportation needs, we will design special activities for those students who would need to come at the regular time. My guess is there aren't going to be too many after the first month. They're going to be making arrangements. The late arrival time will be 8:30, and that will be all other students in grades 10 and 12. So they would be arriving at 8:30, twice a month. Possible freshman activities, and this is where this really gets to be kind of exciting, actually. We can work on transition to high school, orientation, study skills, the rigor of high school and the freedom of high school, and managing that time is going to be important. And I don't think we don't have the time to really take freshmen and start talking to them about their time management. This goes back to that college and career readiness map that we had discussion with, that, you know, when kids have freedom, are they able to manage their time resourcefully? Responsibilities, for example, anti-bullying, drug avoidance, and co-curriculars. Leadership activities, sharing common ground. This is something that former school district we used to do. It's so valuable, bringing students together in a small leadership venue and discovering how people from all different walks of life have common grounds, more common ground than they know. We'd also develop the 5 practices, which is Kouzes and Posner's leadership practices. That's the foundation of our leadership class. And the 7 habits of highly effective teenagers would also be a possible venue for our students as well. Also talk about the code of conduct, the implications of the code of conduct, and how they don't want to be in Mr. McMahon's office. And then we might take time for standardized testing, especially during the OGT practice test time, and help our freshmen with some tutoring. Study tables and makeup work, of course, can apply to freshmen as well, and a very important career exploration, which seems to be really tough, again, for us to do on a regular basis here in high school, and this is a perfect opportunity to start getting the freshmen involved in that. This would be designed and implemented by staff and students, and some of the staff members during the PLCs would go on a rotational basis of working with the freshmen. It wouldn't be the same staff members all the time. One of the discussions we've already had comes from our leadership class, and they're really excited about this, about taking this whole freshman activity, taking the students who have attended our leadership retreat and having them help design and implement the freshman activities. And that would mean them, those students coming to school at the regular time. But our leadership students always seem to be on fire to really do that work. Benefits of the PLCs, there's only one. It's not to benefit the adults or the parents, it's student development energy. Everything we do in this school has to be around student development energy. We can't ever take our eye off that one. Questions?
Have you visited or talked to other schools that have done something like this?
And also Hudson. I have acquaintances at Hudson that have been doing this for years. I think actually they take 2 hours, and I think theirs is every week.
I think it is every week, I don't know what the time frame is.
It's an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Yeah.
They take time there. They, you get a lot of bang for your buck when you're talking about teachers collaborating on their common assessments and their student learning outcomes.
And what is the time for this?
Next year. I'm gonna probably go through Crestwood comments and our broadcast system, as well as maybe probably letters home with the students, as well to roll this thing.
Mr. Monroe, to answer your question, I mean, West Geauga, Chardon, Mayfield, Hudson are the ones that I'm very familiar with that use the process of doing late arrival and doing the freshman kind of orientation academy to help the freshmen. The biggest research on a lot of these things is that, first of all, if you lose a freshman, you usually lose them for 4 years. So you got to catch them young. So you catch them as a freshman. Part of these activities are to catch the freshmen young. The other thing is that PLCs are based on the concept that it's more heads working together to solve one problem. And if you can get teachers working together to a common goal and give them time, they flourish because they're experts in their field and they can talk and share ideas, as opposed to being in isolation where they never get a time to talk, or as Mr. Summers said, you just talk in the hallway.
I know.
So, and the other bit, it's really based on just very simple concepts. Basically talking about how do you want a kid to learn, what do you want kids to learn, how are you going to know if they're going to know it, and that's a common assessment. So you got to get your teachers together to develop that. And then what are you going to do if they don't? So start talking about interventions to help kids. And then what are you going to do if kids already learned it? So how are you going to enrich the kids too? So giving teachers time to work together to develop that gets the best out of the kids, the best out of the teachers, and then ultimately the best out of the building. And that's ultimately the goal out of the PLC process in a nutshell.
There would seem there would be quite a few sophomores, maybe juniors, for transportation issues.
You'd be surprised on OGT days. There's not many
They-
here.
When there's
There's more
a
here
way.
on Monday than there are on Friday.
But they would still be involved in the same.
Absolutely, that, we might get them involved with the freshmen. You know. But I also really like the model of the middle school where if you don't put in the time, you gotta make the time up. So if you don't wanna come in early on those 2 days, you're gonna have to do your homework and do your assignments, or else you're gonna come in on those days to do it. So, getting the kids in could be pulling teeth, but there would have to be consequences for them not coming.
I know at Hudson, they also use that time for study groups, study sessions, review, make up tests, practice tests, things like that. So if anybody needs extra practice in algebra or science or whatever.
Well, the
they can
sky's
have an
kind of the
opportunity.
limit.
So,
When you have this time, it's, the design is pretty much unlimited.
a couple things I wanted to ask, and I understand PLCs and how they work and how you use student data to drive ultimately outcomes that you hope. That said, there's so many other opportunities that could be beneficial to having groups of teachers that normally wouldn't be sitting down at a table talking as a PLC team. Right, PLC, yeah,
Right.
and in other words, I'm wondering how the academy, for example, comes to be if we're only focused on grade level PLCs or something like that. Are there opportunities to develop these learning communities that would involve maybe a teacher from this department and this department and this department, but they may not be related until they sit down and start talking about
Well,
an idea and a direction?
Well, if you
Where
look
to
at,
go.
if you look at Julie's PLCs, they're integrated teams. Okay, I see the value at the high school of doing both. Just because you put teams of teachers together doesn't mean it's every week or every PLC. That whole arrangement, my vision of this is that whole arrangement can change. And in fact, I would want it to change. We wouldn't want departments together all the time, or we would be back to the same thing that we've got now. So I see for common assessments, and talking about common assessments, you have to have like subject teachers together. But when you're developing programs and interdisciplinary teams, then you want to shake that up and do it differently and get different teachers involved at different times and places.
And I would also say the involvement of that is, first you align horizontally and make sure you're horizontal, and then you can do the vertical cross-curricular activities, because you're aligned horizontally within the department, and you can start experimenting where, like you said, the art teachers work with the science teachers to develop things that are cross-curricular and those kind of things, which having that time is beneficial for those practices.
And is there some professional development needs for this? In other words, do all of our teaching staff know what PLCs are, have worked on them, and
Well,
are ready to go when this gets
We're working at
implemented?
lunchtimes this year
Okay.
on assessment. We have a book by O'Connor that we've been using, and the questions and the change in thinking of just how those teachers assess students has been pretty remarkable, actually. And I hear teachers talking all the time about, to me, about how they've changed their thinking about grades, rubrics versus number crunching, these types of things. So this is not new to our staff. The biggest professional development to me is doing it. Just sitting down and learning how to collaborate with each other. And of course there's an accountability in the group has to produce a product each PLC as well.
I have a question. You know, looking at your current schedule, or this year, next year, whatever, looks fairly typical.
This is it.
Okay, very typical. Could, with some rearranging of this, where you're not stuck in the same modules or
Sure.
periods, help?
Good.
Okay, are we looking at that component at all?
I hope it comes out of the PLC.
Okay,
I'm hoping that's one of the prompts that I'm going to really give teachers is what kind, we have block scheduling, all kinds of strategies in between there and the standard schedules. We have trimesters.
right,
You know,
right.
some schools are on trimesters.
Okay,
So, I hope for me to give that top down, in my observation over the years, it doesn't work because teachers rebel. But when they go through the process of doing that, I hope to have creative scheduling, and we're going to need it in the future.
sure. Okay, good.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Summers. We'll move to hearing of the public. If you would like to speak, please stand and identify yourself so we know a name and a face. And
Good evening, Mr. President. My name's Norm Erickson. I live 4217 Mennonite Road. I noticed tonight on the agenda you have some administrative contracts up. I would like to have the opportunity, depending how the vote goes, to question at the end of the meeting, to question those contracts and stuff. If we do that, all depends how the vote goes, but if that's possible.
Mr. Erickson, are you wanting to bring the board back together after the meeting?
No,
Or is
I
this
mean,
something
before
that
you
could be
adjourn the meeting and
individual?
go in executive session. But right now, the vote's not been taken, so I'm not sure I want to question anything.
All right, thank you. Any others? Okay, we'll move to consent agenda. Items 1 through 5 on the consent agenda. Include minutes. We also have lots of donations. That's exciting. Discussion? Call the roll.
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Mr. Sorg?
Yes, motion carries. Non-consent agenda.
A little bit of background on number one for the first item on the non-consent. It's resulting from our communication phone system and network in our district. The current vendor that we use is no longer a licensed carrier, a license to carry the product. So there's a concern by Jeff Wood, our technology, director of technology, that if the phones went down, the company could not immediately fix them to make them operational, and there might be a downtime for who knows how long before they got repaired. So he did extensive research to look at different vendors and got references on the Corporation Communications Consulting Incorporated, that's a licensed vendor for the product that we use to service it just in, case it went down and as needed, and to get it up to speed, because we still are having some phone issues off and on throughout the district. So that's in regards to the contract. So number one is board approval to accept the agreement with Communications Consulting Incorporated for the district phone and network repairs and maintenance as attached.
I'll move.
Second.
Well, Mr. Becker can say.
Discussion?
Are we under any other agreements with anybody at the current time?
We are not. No.
Other discussion?
Mrs. Soltis?
Yes.
Mr. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Lovejoy?
Yes.
Mr. Monroe?
Yes.
Mr. Sword?
Yes. Motion carries.
Number 2, board approval to non-renew the following substitutes at the end of the 2013-14 school year pursuant to Ohio Revised Code